Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit, and we're going to have a gander at something called Katana Zero. This is one of 7 or so games that I recorded at the Adult Swim booth, and I gotta say, they had some really interesting stuff on display. It seems like Adult Swim has gone down the route of quirky, interesting, and in many ways, extremely violent games on PC that appeal to core gamers, many of which have something of a retro throwback aesthetic, but they don't seem to have delved into the horrible pit that is, we look like an 8-bit puzzle platformer thingy. These are games that have great aesthetics and art design in their own right, they just happen to be inspired by games of old, and they certainly don't play like games of old. Katana Zero is brought to you by a very small team. They go by the name of Askiisoft, and this could possibly be best described as a hyper-fast, moment-to-moment combat game that could easily, I think, be compared to Hotline Miami in many ways. Now, it's not to say it looks like Hotline Miami or it even has the same perspective as Hotline Miami. It doesn't. But it has similarities in terms of pacing and the way that the game emphasizes all or nothing, moment-to-moment, one mistake gets you killed gameplay. Now, what you might also notice down the bottom here is something that Hotline Miami certainly did not have, which is a Telltale-style conversation system. Now, it's possible to actually interrupt the person that you're talking to, kind of Mass Effect style, and if you do that, to certain characters, not only does it give you different dialogue, but it actually can have an in-game effect, as I'm going to show you later when I decide to repeatedly interrupt the clerk at the hotel desk. Alright, so you are this samurai fellow, you are getting mysterious calls from mysterious people, no doubt about that, and you are of course tasked with horribly murdering everybody. Now in order to do that, you are given a samurai sword, your katana, hence the name Katana Zero. This will in most cases result in a one-shot kill, although not always. If the enemy also has a bladed weapon, they can deflect your weapon, and a so-called clash will occur, which will require you to recover and attack them before they're able to get back up again. You also have at your disposal a drug, which will slow down time. Now, you can use this to knock bullets out of the air, as you saw earlier. You can use it to make combat a little bit easier. It's a very, very limited use, as you can see. It's an intense meditation, they claim. It's actually a horrible narcotic. You don't want to use too much of it. And apparently, it is possible, if you keep using the drug, to hallucinate. And you will see what really happened to you at the end of the level on the playback security footage, which comes in the form of an actual VCR that you can play on a virtual television, which is in your hideout, which is kind of neat. So you can see the VCR or 80s or 90s action movie aesthetic quite clearly there, as well as the rather psychedelic color palette, which is obviously done deliberately. Bust through the door and instantly get killed. Now, I did mention this is quite like Hotline Miami in some ways, and one of those ways is that you die instantly and you have to restart the level if you don't do it correctly. It will give you a quick rewind, which again is a nice feature. Don't know if it necessarily serves any practical purpose, but it looks great and it does make thematic sense. They're sticking to the whole idea of everything's recorded via a security camera, as you can see right here. So you can watch the playback of what happened, or at least what you think may have happened. You can also skip forward, and you've even got the little time dilation bar at the bottom, which is straight out of a early 90s video camera, which I really like. You know, I appreciate that they put that level of detail in there. What I did not see in the demo is the idea that the security footage can actually be different to what happened. They mentioned that it's possible, especially if you end up taking too many drugs and going down the wrong path, that you think you are a samurai, ronin, or ninja hero that just murdered a group of bad guys, and in reality, you just killed a bunch of innocent people. It is entirely possible that that could happen, although they didn't really demonstrate that necessarily in the game on the show floor. But, you know, it was a 20-minute or so demo. It's to be expected. You notice that I also have an invincibility dash now. The dash has invincibility frames, or so-called iframes. As long as you're dashing, you will not take damage, but you do have to do it fairly precisely and make sure that you don't screw it up. There you go. You can also knock enemies into those laser grids, which is very effective. You're able to pick up items and throw them, which will either kill them or knock them back. if your trusty katana is not the one doing the job, and in many cases it is. You'll notice how unbelievably responsive this looks. Obviously, this is recorded at 60 frames per second. Apologies for the slightly low resolution. It's just what the game demo was running in on that machine. But the kills are just instant, and the controls are super snappy and responsive. That's, again, another reason to compare it to Hotline Miami, because there are several games that do this whole all-or-nothing, kill-or-be-killed gameplay style, but not all of them have super snappy and responsive controls, and I think for a game like this, you absolutely need that. You need the game to do exactly what it says it's going to do when you press the button. And it does, thankfully. It actually feels really, really good. The whole thing is extremely satisfying. Hyper-violent, no doubt about that, but you have a variety of different angles at which you can attack there. I just used the slow down, and then you can see I used a sort of diagonal uppercut style affair to kill the enemy. I just turned off the laser grid. If I turned it back on, I could have had them run into it, and you saw I just got gunned down horribly, which I could have potentially deflected, but with 3 bullets, probably not. When you end up against any kind of armed enemy, someone that happens to have a gun, then you need to be incredibly careful. You have simultaneously a feeling of immense power, but also vulnerability, which is a neat little twist. You feel like a ninja assassin or a samurai, and that's great. You get that power fantasy right out of the game, but you're brought right back down to earth very, very quickly if you don't do it right. There's a slowdown, and then I did the downwards cut and slashed them up. And that was incredibly satisfying. And of course, you get to watch it all again, which is why I like there being little replays in these stages. Thankfully, the stages are fairly short, and you can fast forward, so the replay system doesn't get obnoxious, and it's possible to skip it. There you go. What I didn't really get out of the theme is that apparently all of these little efforts right here are you planning your attack. So I guess what actually happens in this playback right here is not really what you did, which is odd. You know, obviously it is what you did in the game, but it seems like what actually happens after the planning stage could be different, and that makes it worth watching the CCTV footage. And really, all you just did with the gameplay aspect of it is to plan your attack, and then the game sort of executes it. I mean, mechanically, there's literally no difference. There's no question about that, but there does seem like there are ways in which they can really screw with the narrative if they use that particular conceit. It's a very unusual one. You've kind of got to suspend your disbelief and disconnect the mechanics of the game from the way that it's presented to really understand how that works. It's a bit weird, there's no doubt about that, but I think it could potentially be rather interesting. This is the VCR that I was talking about right here, and this is how you load the levels, which I thought was a really nice little effect. All right, now I'm going to show you me interrupting this woman at the hotel desk over and over and over again, and she gets madder and madder, which I think is great. I like the fact that you can visually see on her face that she's getting very angry. That's a nice little bit of humor in an otherwise relatively serious game, actually. You know, it doesn't seem like there's all that many pleasant things going on in Katana Zero. But apparently, I was told by the developer that what I just did there actually affects the level going forward. So that was a choice that I made, which probably made the level more difficult or changed the enemy lineup or anything along those lines. And welcome to the MURDOWER Hotel. Now, this is not an easy level, no doubt about that. I think there's going to be some very interesting speedrunning videos available here. Just right out of the lift and straight shot me in the face. Yeah, don't mess around in here. They certainly will not. I think there's going to be some really cool speedrunning videos, and people that are good at this on stream are going to be absolutely hypnotic to watch, as they are in games like Hotline Miami, and even platformers like Super Meat Boy as well, even though this is really not a platformer. It's the same sort of idea, that all-or-nothing precision. And I particularly like the combat-focused side-scrollers. I'm not really a big fan of Meat Boy, even though I thought the game was really great. You know, I think on a technical level and in terms of its mechanics, and even its aesthetic, actually, you can appreciate it even if you don't like platformers. But in terms of this game, this is all action all the time. It's incredibly focused on timing. It's incredibly focused on judging the distance correctly, not screwing things up, being able to pick up items and throw them at your enemy, and just chaining kill after kill after kill after kill together. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to call these games action puzzlers, actually, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it. Maybe it's not the right way of looking at it, but considering the amount of planning required and the precision movements, it almost feels like there is a solution to each level. And as a result, you can maybe argue, just throw the lamp at him. that a game like this is actually a puzzle game of some sort. That's the clash that I was talking about earlier. That enemy had a bladed weapon, so I was able to deflect his attack, but he also deflected mine, so I had to recover quickly. You've got to be careful against enemies like that, and the designers mixed them in to the regular packs of enemies, because if you clash, you are temporarily stunned, so someone could attack you and you wouldn't be able to defend yourself. But everything about this in these sort of short little levels is all about that moment-to-moment, second-to-second, millisecond-to-millisecond gameplay, those short shots of adrenaline. And I actually dig Katana Zero a great deal. I think it's really well put together. Already, it feels incredibly polished, and I'm looking forward to see what they can do with it in the rest of the title. The one possibility that I think may come up in terms of the game getting a little bit stale may be that they don't vary the combat up all that much. It's easy to vary up enemies, but I don't know if they're going to have different weapons. I assume you're going to be reliant on your katana, and obviously you have throwables, which is fine, but if we're going to have several hours of katana gameplay with either no other moves added or no other secondary weapons added, then we may see people get a little bit bored of that. But if you notice up to the top right there, you've got icons which represent the weapons that you're holding. That plus the description on the website, which talks about the rest of an assassin's arsenal and your trusty katana and the Kronos drug for the slowdown right there, as you can see, indicates that you will certainly get something a little bit later. It just wasn't in this floor demo here. But I gotta say, what I played of the floor demo was great. Knocking people into lasers, the precision combat, the slowdown effect being an interesting limited resource that might actually have some sort of narrative consequence for overusing it, I think is a really, really awesome idea. I was playing it, Strippin was playing it as well, actually, and he had an absolute blast, but it does seem like his kind of game, no doubt about it. And you do want to keep playing the levels through, even if you fail. I think it helps that you have the little rewind and the little replay, and you can try and figure out exactly what the right way to do things. Because, you know, this sequence right here I found to be very tricky. It's like, well, I've got to slide down here. One of these guys has a blade, so my first attack is going to get deflected if I don't time it correctly. There is a cleaver on the floor that I could potentially pick up, but doing this whole sequence was not easy. There's also an interesting mechanic a little bit later on in this level that I can skip forward to. Let me just show you me doing this correctly, by the way. Just to say, yes, it can be done. There's the slowdown, there's the clash, my recovery time, and then I get murdered again. But let's try it and do it properly. Alright, good on the side, slide down a little bit, slash, slow down, there's the clash, jump up in the air, slash and a slash again. Alternatively, I could have dropped down there, picked up the cleaver, thrown it to the right. I wanted to save it to take out this enemy because he does have a gun. Kicking through there, if you don't have a thrown item, is a little bit tricky because you have to use your slowdown to deflect the bullet. You might also notice here that it's got an interesting movement mechanic in the sense that you can go outside the level. So I'm actually outside the window here, which is not entirely obvious, I have to admit. That's something that hopefully they make a little bit more obvious in the launch version, because I did get slightly confused as to which plane I was on. If I was in the main hallway, I would have been killed by the lasers. If I am behind that, if I'm outside the window, then I'm not killed by them, but I also have to deal with enemies that are out there also, who are represented by these sort of blacked out silhouettes. I believe it is also possible for enemies to traverse from the front of the screen to the back of the screen as well, so you do have to watch out for that. If you happen to be on a plane that an enemy isn't, and he switches and then just murders you instantly, I imagine that would get a little bit frustrating. Doing pretty well here. Let's grab the bust, which will allow us to break through and instantly get murdered and knocked into the lasers. Like I said, it's very, very timing focused. You can screw up very, very easily. But this is about the end of the level. I'll show you my successful run through this, since I died a lot going through it. And I gotta say, you know, Katana Zero has a great deal of style in terms of it being a moment-to-moment murder game. It's very, very good at what it does. It feels incredibly responsive. The katana combat is very satisfying. Being able to attack in multiple directions is a nice little feature, as well as being able to grab throwables and do things like that. I am very interested to see what they do with the Kronos drug, honestly, and how it's going to affect the story, and also how the different responses and relationships that you have with the characters based on that dialogue system are going to actually affect the gameplay. Alright, as promised, let me show you the successful run. There's the rewind, and it'll slide down here. Slash, grab the cleaver, toss, knocks the guy over. Then we will use our Kronos to slow things down, deflect the bullet back at him, dash out the back there, throw the vase, knock him down, kill the rest, dodge back in. As soon as he passes, make sure we get this timing right, because he will kill you almost immediately, otherwise you don't want to be facing him at the time. Grab the bust, wait for him to turn around, kick in the door, toss the bust. Kind of a wasted slash there, but that is it. There you go. And that's the successful completion of the level. And who exactly this guy is, couldn't tell you. There's obviously going to be some very dark and interesting story elements that this game features when it comes out, which is supposedly going to be this year, by the way, according to the website. So that is Katana Zero. It's very singular in its focus and what it actually does, with a really cool vibe and aesthetic and some very interesting music. A game that will no doubt be compared multiple times to Hotline Miami, despite the gameplay certainly by no means being identical. But I'm interested to see what comes out of it. Looks like this is going to be a game that I'm going to enjoy very much. I certainly enjoyed what I played on the show floor. And one last little surprise. You remember the guy in the elevator that we saw earlier? Yeah, he's still there. Katana Zero, ladies and gentlemen, from the Adult Swim booth at PAX East 2016. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. And remember to check out the rest of my PAX coverage. I have tons of exciting new games coming your way over the next week. I'll see you next time.